We're going to do a quick review of phrases and clauses and then start talking about how we use different types of clauses to build sentences, starting with simple and compound. So you need to be on page 30 of your interactive notebook. We had already glued these pages in last week. And you're going to be taking notes in these spaces here. And I'm going to be working from this presentation as we review. So we're going to start with types of phrases. First, I want you to write the definition of what a phrase is. We just did all this review and finished taking our midterm last week. But a phrase is a group of words without, it does not have both a subject and a verb. And we have different types of phrases. There are prepositional phrases, infinitives, verb phrases, and appositives. And the beauty of screencast is if I'm going too fast, you can always pause this and then jot your notes in and then resume. All right, so just to recap, a prepositional phrase, the formula is preposition plus modifier plus noun. You see that we don't have both a subject and a verb in here, so this is a phrase. Another type of phrase is infinitive. Our text clue, what do we look for in a sentence, or what do we, when we want to write one, we have to have to plus a verb. Here we see that we have a verb, but there's no subject, so this is a phrase. A verb phrase has a helping verb, has, have, had, do, does, did, plus a main verb. And your main verb is the verb that we look at to decide is it action or linking. And the last type, an appositive. An appositive is a noun that's followed immediately by a noun, and then within the phrase following it, there has to be another noun. So my example is Mrs. Culleton. The noun is teacher, and then there's some phrasing to describe the teacher, my short teacher. Okay, all of these are phrases because they do not have both a subject and a verb. Which brings us to clauses. A clause is a group of words that has both a subject and a verb, and we have two different types. Independent. An independent clause, we've talked about the idea of being independent as a person. You can stand alone. You don't need any help. An independent sentence has both a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete idea. She is the subject, loved is the verb, and we said that you can add as many different phrases to it as long as there's just one subject and one verb. It's still just one independent clause. And then a dependent clause takes that idea of an independent clause but changes it to an incomplete idea or a fragment by adding that little word at the beginning, an awubis, or a subordinating conjunction. So now if I add this word in front of my subject and verb, since she loved the song, it no longer expresses a complete thought. It does not stand alone, and so it's not a complete sentence. So when we build sentences, we take our clauses, we put them together, we mix them up, and we can make different types of sentences. So the first type of sentence is a simple sentence. A simple sentence is one independent clause, meaning there's just one main subject and one main verb. And again, we could add as many phrases as we want to it. I love learning grammar, comma, the type of writing that involves parts of speech, comma, on Fridays with my friends. I can add appositives, I can add infinitives, I can add prepositional phrases, but there's still only one subject and one verb. So it's a simple sentence. The other type is a compound, and we were thinking about compounds in other worlds. So if we think about in science, a compound in science is when you put together two elements, so like water, H2O, you're taking hydrogen, oxygen, and you're putting them together to make a new compound. When we think of compound words like basketball, baseball, we're taking two separate words and putting them together to make one new word. It's a compound word. So if we transfer that idea to the idea of sentences, a compound sentence must be two sentences put together, and that's exactly what it is. Two independent clauses. So when we think of our text clues, how do we recognize them? Well, with a simple sentence, we just look for a subject and a verb, just the same as an independent clause, because that's what it is. For a compound sentence, we have a couple of different things we can look at. We need two subjects and verbs, so we look for a subject and a verb with a comma And I put and in here, but we'll talk about some different fanboys, comma and then another subject and a verb. And if we don't want to use the comma and, I like to call this a more sophisticated way of writing a compound sentence. We can use this punctuation mark called a semicolon. But either way, you have to have a subject and a verb on both sides of either that comma and or the semicolon. So in your notes, I didn't have a place for you to write these, but find a blank space either in the margin on the left or the right or somewhere blank on your notes, and I want you to write all of these fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. These are coordinating conjunctions. They're words that can combine two ideas together. And when we talk about compound sentences with a comma in front of them, they can combine two independent clauses. So I gave you some sentences here from a book called From Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. And each of these sentences is compound. So I'm going to show you how we prove it. So the first thing that we're going to need either is a comma fanboy or a semicolon. And I'm going to tell you all of these have a comma fanboy. So you might need to look back at your list. When we find one, we circle it. So in this case, we're going to circle comma but. And to prove that it's a compound sentence, then I should be able to find a subject and a verb on both sides. So we're going to look on this side first. I don't see any phrases to get rid of, so I'm going to ask myself, what's the sentence about? It's about cancer. What did cancer do? The cancer had taken. So my subject is cancer. The verb is had taken. It's a verb phrase. Now I'm going to look on the other side of my comma but. She saw the world with more clarity than ever before. I like to get rid of my prepositional phrases and infinitives so I don't get confused. So if you have a highlighter, I would highlight with more clarity. And then I'd look at what's left in the sentence to be the subject. She is the subject. What did she do? She saw. So I can tell this is a compound sentence because it has a comma with a fanboy and a subject and a verb on both sides. That makes it compound. The next sentence, to me, school is always stressful, and the first day of any school year is especially insane. First, I see my comma fanboy, so I'm going to circle it. I'm going to look on the left side to find the subject and verb, get rid of this prepositional phrase, to me, and I'm left with school is always stressful. What's the subject? School. What's the school doing? What's the verb? School is, and this time it's a linking verb. Now to be compound, I've got to go back on the other side and I have to find a subject and a verb on this side. So I get rid of this prepositional phrase of any school year, and I know that that can't be anything because it's already got a job. So my sentence is about the day, the first day, and what is the day doing? The day is another linking verb. Sentence 3, for the purposes of this god-awful book, I have to talk briefly about girls, so I will try to do it without punching myself in the eyeball. So I would look for my comma fanboy. It's over here, comma so. Looking on this side of the sentence, I can see a lot of phrases I can get rid of. Prepositional phrase, for the purposes. Prepositional phrase, of this god-awful book. I see an infinitive here, to talk. So when I look at what's left after I get rid of those, I know that the subject is about I. And what did I do? I have. So I have a subject and a verb on the left side of my comma so. I'm going to go the other side. I'm going to get rid of prepositional phrase without punching myself. And we talked in class that punching looks like a verb, but because it's got this suffix ing on it, it changes a little bit. On a test, I would never put that kind of word in there until we've practiced a little bit, but I'm going to tell you that without punching myself is a prep phrase. And in the eyeball is a prepositional phrase, and to do is an infinitive. So when I look at what's left, the subject is I, and my verb phrase in this case is will try. So I can say that this is a compound sentence because it has a comma fanboy in the middle and a subject and a verb on both sides of it. In class, we did 4 and 5, so if you are absent or you're just reviewing, you continue to 4 and 5. 6 and 7 we'll do in a center later this week.